Hello, I am Sanikia Bass.
I'm Courtney Brooks.
I'm Sarah Bullis.
And I'm Megan Lisenby. Uh, so we're going to jump right into prompt one and discuss how did leaders' use of data align with best practices. So we're going to discuss how these practices aligned with learning, qualitative and quantitative analysis and data. What I observed when I observed my leader, it's one of our administrators. Um, she was doing a TEKS evaluation on another teacher. So I came and I observed her observing. And she was able to observe her performance in the classroom and expectation alignment. So not only was she filling out TEKS, but she also filled out um, a form that talked about meeting expectations in the building. We have literacy goals that are part of our SIP goals this year. She was also talking about TPT strategies. So she talked about both of those qualitatively and quantitatively taking data for that, and then using that data to then uh, give back individual feedback on performance. So yes, and find areas of weakness and strength.
My area that I observed was a little bit different. I worked with one of our APs. She's our guidance counselor, and we looked at a combination of behavior, attendance, and grades. And we used all that information to kind of triangulate those students that we were concerned with in one way or another, either that they weren't being challenged enough, or if they were in the lower tier. And so, like, she explained that our bottom tier was like our bottom 30%, our bottom 10% was SPED or referred to SPED. Our like 11 to 30 was automatically EIP. And then our top 20% had a potential for extending and trying to push them a little further. Not necessarily gifted, but looking at that information. So, I mean, the data that we collected kind of showed that the data wasn't just collected and kind of thrown in a pile, that it was actually used to inform instruction, and that we kind of triangulated all of those pieces to inform that instruction, as was mentioned in the best practices article that we read, and that those actions are designed for all learners, and that we're continuously reviewing how we collect that data to improve those practices.
So you like compare like month to month?
Yeah, or student to student. Like, are we seeing
improvement
with a student that's on, gets EIP services, or a student that's on SPED?
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
we do that too, compare month to month and student to student as well.
Yeah, that's what Megan and I teach at the same school, and we're both on the same leadership team. And we look like on a monthly basis at how numbers are changing. And for this assignment, I actually got to sit in with our Georgia MTSS teacher leader. So she's not necessarily an assistant principal, but she's in a high leadership role, serving as this new role that the state just released called Georgia MTSS teacher leader. They've kind of put that responsibility of gathering the MTSS data on one teacher. And we looked at absences, discipline, and academics, just to see, what areas our school is functioning well in, or areas that might be considered tier one, like a tier one concern. And she showed me all the different ways that she like pulled the reports and everything that she had to do to get like the numbers specifically. But this was really good for data-driven decision-making that was mentioned in the article, simply because we took these numbers that she pulled. She showed me how to pull them. And then we took them to our leadership meeting so that our assistant principals, principal, and then teacher leaders within the building could discuss that data and make decisions based on that data, whether it was a tier one issue. We sit down, we compare September to October, and what are the next steps? That's kind of the big question, is what are the next steps? And we formulate a plan as a team, and then we take that plan and we disaggregate it into our subject areas, grade levels, things like that. But it's really nice to be able to hear from teachers and leaders as a mixture. But I really like the way that they pull that data so that everything we do in that meeting is purposeful because it's directly related to data, which I mean is so important. So I really like the way that we do that, and it was really interesting seeing how she pulled the information from that state report.
Now, Courtney, did you guys talk about, I didn't realize this, and I guess this is a new change. We're a PBIS school. And in talking to my leader, that is new. So all of the data and the attendance and the behavior, we didn't really get into the whole weeds of it, the nuts and bolts of it, but all of that information is supposed to go into the positive behavior intervention system, and it affects kind of our qualification, I guess, if you will, based on that data.
The CCRPI.
Yes.
That's one thing that's not my observation, but I can't speak to it. We are a PBIS school as well, and attendance is a really big challenge for my school. And so we have actually started an attendance challenge where every day, at the end of the day, the principal gets on the intercom and he actually, give a shout out to the classroom with the perfect attendance. And at the end of the month, the classes with the highest perfect attendance, they're celebrated. And that's actually being conducted by we have an in-house school social worker, because when we looked at our data, like for our SIP plan, attendance was a major issue in our school. But I had the opportunity to observe my assistant principal as well as the math instructional coach. So part of our SIP goal is to increase our math scores by 3% for the GMAS. And what they did, we recently took the Beacon assessment. Are you all familiar with Beacon? Okay, so it's kind of like it's made by the same as the GMAS. And they were able to look at the data for each grade level, 3rd through 5th grade, with the teachers. And then they broke down the data based off of the lowest domain. The lowest domain. And it's triangulated as well, because we have to consider the students' attendance. We have to, consider the different population of students that we serve, also the different accommodations. So what they came up with was an action plan. And the action plan is going to run for 5 weeks prior to us actually after we take the Beacon in December. We'll go back and do the same plan again. But I did like the fact that they were able to hone in on those different domains, because of course you're still teaching your grade level content. And there were some aha moments, having the SPED teachers in there. Sometimes the mindset is a little different because they think, well, because they're SPED, they can't do. But to just see the aha moments, like, okay, this baby's in 4th grade, but this baby's domain is in 3rd grade. So they're working together to create a plan to help close some of those gaps.
Well, I guess let's move on to question 2 really quickly. It says, what surprised you about the decision-making process? And Shay, I actually really connected with what you were saying about the attendance, because in our last leadership meeting, we made the decision, and I know Megan probably wanted to mention this.
No,
we
you're
saw
good.
that we had some attendance concerns, and we implemented this practice, and Megan, jump in if you would like.
Yeah, sure.
Where students who hadn't missed a day got entered in a drawing for a $100 gift card.
Wow.
We had 2 students win so far. And they'd call their name over the announcements and stuff, and they come and get their card. And obviously we haven't implemented it enough to see the effects, because it's only been 2 weeks.
It's only been 2 weeks. Yeah.
But we're noticing, and I feel like it's really, really going to help.
The kids talk about it. So that, and they're doing a big overarching one for what is it, a PS4
I think it's
or
a PlayStation or
$500?
something. Yeah, it's big.
Huge. And our CTAE, so instead of doing, the money is coming from our CTAE program, which is pretty cool. And we're finding that we're trying to figure out new ways to invigorate and encourage them, and also ways of, speaking on PBS, rewarding those kids that really do the right thing all the time, always feel like all they're hearing is bad stuff, but anyways, surprises about decision making. You mentioned, Shay, that you were shocked about what some of the sped teachers had to say. Was that
Mhm.
what you said?
Yes.
Um, I
Kind
would say go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm sorry. Just kind of shocked because they just had aha moments.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mindset can be limited because these students, they have disabilities, but
Sure.
they also have capabilities as well.
Absolutely.
So, I watched the administrators, hone in on those specific domains. Like, okay, let's target these domains with these targeted students.
Well, cool.
Well, one thing that I was surprised about, like I said, Megan and I are kind of in the same program. We are both leaders in our building, so we go to leadership meetings every month. And for this leadership meeting with this assignment, I was really intentional about sitting back and not being as much a teacher leader who gave her opinion from the classroom, but I tried to sit back and almost serve in that role of like an assistant principal or a principal, and trying to hear the teachers out. And it was just really interesting watching, some of the teachers and the way that they spoke to our principal. And, there were moments where they said, well, you said, and just the way that she kind of countered that. And it wasn't in a degrading way. And it was very positive, keeping those positive relationships and trust. I just feel like she did a really good job of kind of balancing, well, this is kind of what the group said, not what I said, and then from there kind of pushing them to say, okay, what's the plan? What are the next steps?
I will say that, and I'll piggyback off that a little bit. She was talking about our principal was talking about a book study that they were doing, about how communication and how you communicate situations, and a lot of what she does is kind of dispel like miscommunication. She does a really good job of clarifying. So it's like, okay, this was said in the last meeting, or this was what this person said, or what I hear a lot in the meeting is what I'm hearing is, and lots of clarifications. I really like that our group doesn't end up in knockdown dragouts. I've heard horror stories, and this is my first year on leadership, so it's nice to feel. And I did notice that you weren't chiming in as much today, Courtney. I was like, she must be listening. Because I was thinking about this assignment at the same time. We were lucky in that this meeting happened at the same time. But really, I think that's important too, Courtney, is listening during those decision making processes. And I'll segue a little bit. When we talked about TEKS in my specific, it's a little bit different from what y'all are talking about. Like, I didn't realize how complex. Like, I know what TEKS looks like from my end. I think we get surprised looking at what things look like from an administrative end. It's a lot more complicated, because you can go in SLDS and you can look at, okay, I made a level this or a level that, I made a 3 or a 4 in, TEKS, but like they're doing way more than just that. She was writing down all of these, tidbits here and there. She was collecting more than just TEKS data, which I think is so important. And I was like, I thought you just came in and checked your boxes and left. And it's more than that. That's what surprised me. That ultimately all of this data then comes together and becomes what it becomes. And I will, say those literally, my eyes have been open to how the decision making process happens, because I've never been on that end of it. I've only ever been on the receiving end of it.
So, just to piggyback, so because my district, we are modeling the Georgia Leads.
Mhm.
You all heard of that, Georgia
Mhm.
Leads? So it looks different from TEKS. I hear you say like a level 4, but the way the Georgia Leads will happen now is, it's like a staircase, basically.
Yeah.
It's like a staircase. So it's not like, okay, well, I got a level 4 on this. And I mean, it's ups and downs, but it is totally different when you're looking at it from the administrative side, because I have had the opportunity to sit on some of the Georgia Leads observation and the TEKS observation. So when you're like in that different setting, you're like, whoa, this is not you just walking in, like taking notes, like you said.
Yeah.
I can definitely.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things that surprised me when I observed and worked with our counselor is just the depth in which they look at the behavior, the grades, and the attendance. And like, they don't just look at that, but it's like kind of a which came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, did the attendance happen because we're pushing and the ability isn't there? Like, is that what's happening with the attendance? Or did the grades fall because of the attendance, and like really honing in on that and looking at that data, like, okay, this student is out, you know, Mondays and Fridays, you know, consistently every morning or all day. And like, what does that tell us? Does that tell us that, you know, or they're there, like, so, but they're not there the rest of the week? Does that tell us that like they're coming in for those meals because they haven't eaten all week? Does that tell us that they don't have a place, you know, that they're staying someplace else, you know, on the weekend because they don't really have a place to live? Like really looking at that data and trying to see if we can come up with some patterns, some, you know, some assumptions,
some of
and then
them,
some sort of plan.
you have to be really creative. Like, for example, I had a kid who was in our SPED program who would randomly not show up. And it was because we realized that mom worked nights. She never woke up in the morning. This student didn't have the capability of waking her own self up. And she needed mom to do that, but mom would work nights and sleep in the morning. And she thought that her daughter was getting on the bus and then wouldn't realize until she woke up halfway or later on in the day, 3 o'clock, oh crap, you haven't gone to school, you know, as specific examples. Like, you'd be really surprised where those gaps happen, and how they happen is really crazy.
Yeah, I've
So-
got one kiddo in my class right now. Family was homeless. They've been, you know, at mom's house. They have stay locally when they have money, but then they go, and so they're late. They don't come in until 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. And then I just found out that, you know, mom's been incarcerated this week. So now I've got a whole new set of people dropping them off. And it's like, how do these kids function if their basic needs haven't been met?
For sure.
And then I have another kiddo, real quick, that has got an older sibling, and mom talks to me on a regular, and she's like, I'm dropping my kid off at school every morning, you know, 16, 17 years old, and he's walking away from the school. She's like, what do I do? Like, I don't want the truancy officer knocking at my door. Like, I've got my 6-year-old that, you know, like, how's that going to look? And I'm like, Mama, you just need to keep communicating with the, you know, reaching out. Like, I'm doing the best I can. But at the end of the day, 16, 17-year-olds, how do you force them to come to school? And we have just started implementing a much smaller scale, because we're a primary building, of what y'all were talking about with the cards. Yeah, we do little gift cards to McDonald's or whatever, because, you know, they're
Happy Meals.
pre-K. Yes. You know, like,
We just gave out ice cream Sundays yesterday
Yes.
to the little people. So
you know,
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah, our high schoolers, they could care less about a McDonald's gift card. We got to
Right.
give them the good stuff, you know. They
Absolutely.
need gas money.
but I do like that, you know, all of our leaders, that they're considering the attendance, because the attendance, it
That's the
correlates
line I'm seeing.
academics. You know, if they're not in school, then of course they're not getting the academics that they need.
And it doesn't matter how much data we take if they're not here for us to take the data on.
right.
You know?
Even if they're not at school.
If you don't have the kids at school, then the teacher can't be doing their job. You can't take evaluation on them, and you can't take evaluation on the kids. So there's
And that was
across
one of
the
the
board.
That was one of the high points from that Georgia MTSS teacher leader I talked with. And obviously the leadership group, like talking about how the absences align so perfectly with the academic side, which I guess that kind of could bring us into that next question of how would you approach a similar situation as a future leader? And I think that we're doing a good job, like gathering this data. As I watched her gather it, and I'm just one of those, I'm an Excel junkie. Like, I know what I'm doing on Excel. And there were just so many things that she could have done that would have sped the process up. But you could also create visual, like charts, like pie graphs, things like that, because it's just being presented in columns right now, which isn't ineffective. But some people, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Visual learners are, you know, our thing. So I think creating charts would be very effective. I know Megan would love to see a chart in leadership next week or next month.
I love a visual.
I might try
Visual
to do that.
arts.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I think that there are more ways, and there's more efficient ways to gather the data she was gathering. And then kind of going to the principal, one question that I had to ask her after our first meeting, they were talking about, is this a tier 1 issue? Tier 1. We kept throwing around this term of tier 1. And when I met with the MTSS Georgia lead teacher, I actually asked her, I said, what quantifies tier 1? Like, how do I know what tier 1 is? And she was like, I don't know. So when the person who's leading your data doesn't know what quantifies tier 1, you know, obviously we need to point those things out. So I think looking at it as a principal, I might have quantified certain things at the beginning of the year just so everyone's on the same page. And then I just think there's better ways to gather the data we were looking at. I think the comparison and the discussion is great. I just think maybe leading up to it, there could have been better steps to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
I'll piggyback off of that and say that what I thought about with similar situations as a future leader was communication and feedback. Like, how does that come from TEKS? And when I think about every TEKS evaluation that I've had, usually I don't find out where I'm struggling, where I'm doing great until like we've had like a summative at Christmas time or at the very end of the year. And what I'm thinking is, there was at one point where they would evaluate us and then they would send us the form and their responses to the form, like getting immediate feedback so that I know, hey, these are tier 1 interventions I could be doing in my own classroom. If you see that, there's a cell phone issue or you're not doing whatever these things are that are beneficial to the teacher in the moment, when like months later down the road, it's not helpful. And not everybody, I had written down specifically, I was like, I don't check my SLDS every day. I don't, sometimes I forget to, even when they come observe me. And sometimes I forget that they came and observed me before I can even look in there to see what level I made. And all I see is the level and nothing else, and so I think that kind of ties into that, approaching in the future,
So-
being transparent and
Yeah.
And the way you handle that too, like the way you share those scores,
Yes,
because
yes.
not every teacher wants to get observed 5, 6, 7 times a year. So how do you make it positive? And you have to build that trusting relationship like we've talked
For
about
sure.
throughout this entire, specialist program. But sorry, Shay, you were about to talk. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, so one thing you will like when you all transition to Georgia Leads, because it's required for administrators to debrief within 10 days.
Oh, okay, great. Well,
And
that's good to know.
yeah, because I'm like that too. Like you don't.
I'm like, I want to know either that I did really good or that I, need help.
Right.
And
I
it's
kind of want to
really,
know, what do those conversations, or is that different? Like how do you feel about that versus TEKS, that comparison? Do you think it's effective?
So the reason I think it's effective, I'm gonna piggyback on one thing Megan said. Like you don't want to always have these observations. So based off your level, novice, induction, or professional teachers, you have a certain amount of observations, kind of like TEKS, but not as many. So if you're novice, I think it's about 3. Professional is like 1, and then you have an administrative cycle. So you're only getting 2 per year, and there's questions already developed with Georgia Leads, debrief questions. So basically, like if you get all of your indicators checked, the question would be an extended learning opportunity. So it may be where you may lead because you did well in this area, you may lead a collaborative discussion with a grade level.
that's great.
If you miss an indicator, then it gives you different strategies to work on.
Sure.
So I do like that part of it. And
Purposeful too.
as a new teacher, you're not graded on 10 standards.
Mhm.
So it's about
Well, and also it's showing them the data that they need to then help them. Like we just did a PD, a whole presentation on PD. Then they're figuring out that data they need to figure out, okay, the wide consensus of teachers here based on this observation, we can help them with a PD that's more straightforward, that is more beneficial with their time, all of that.
I think that kind of leads Megan into like my strategy as a, future leader would be professional development to understand the use of the triangulated data and
That's great.
like how can we like help our teachers? Not that we need to get like, so far into the weeds, but like just understanding how we're using this information to inform the instruction. Like I think that we all as classroom teachers need an overview of why is it important? I think especially we had this issue with a coworker of mine today. Her child was marked absent at the beginning of first period. Then she was marked present, but because the next 4 classes didn't take attendance, that original absence in first period stood, and so she was marked, and my coworker's freaking out. She's like, where the heck is my daughter? Like, I don't know. I digress because like that whole, right, like that misinformation. But if we really understood what we were taking the data for, those 4 periods that nobody took attendance might.
It's not a student problem, it's a teacher problem. Like
It
you're
is.
identifying those areas where it really needs to be addressed.
And it might matter more if teachers understood why we were taking that data and how that was used, as opposed to like I don't have the extra 3 minutes in my classroom. Like I'm already have to do this and I have to do this and I have to do this. Like this is at the bottom. Like somebody's already taken attendance. They're here. They're not here.
Yeah.
You know, there's no value in it.
Yeah, I actually had a really good experience. I know we're running out of time, but I actually had an experience with that this year. We had a senior who went missing. Like she was listed as a missing person. And I was talking with our principal and she brought up, you know, this is why attendance is important because where's the first place they came? They came to us. When's the last time you saw her? And there were teachers who just marked her present days after she was a missing student.
Oh, wow.
And that makes the school.
Because they were
look
just
like,
hitting
that almost makes us
submit, you
liable.
know.
Yeah. It wasn't going to be checking them. You have to check them when they're absent.
Yes. Yeah.
We
So-
had similar in when I was in Vermont at the middle school. We had a student that there was a whole custody dispute, and so the child like couldn't be technically registered in school, but like she was there, and then all of a sudden she wasn't. But nobody was tracking her because she was never our student. Because when they tried to register her, they were like, "You don't have custody. You can't register. You don't have the documentation." And so we went a whole year, and then it's like nobody knows where this child is. Nobody knows who was custody. Like for all we know, you know, she's, you know, in a box somewhere on a slow boat to China.
Right.
So overall, I think we're getting the idea of, you know, I think really the point of these assignments is to figure out, you know, why data is taken, how it aligns, best practices, how then that contributes to decision making, and then how it's like that trickle down effect. Like you're grabbing this data, we're all discussing it in leadership, we're all presenting it, and it's no different than how we do it in our classrooms. So
And I think that last question is important too about the
how to
reflection.
reflect.
Like how can we improve this for next time? Even if it was effective, what worked? I think the reflection's key, whether you're
Absolutely.
a teacher or a leader.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do
think
agree.
another-
The way I would approach, like my situation, similar. I think it was a great meeting. However, what I would do differently, I would just make sure that everyone's on the same page. And then I love what Sarah said. She said, like, triangulate the data. So looking at more than one piece of data. Because that's one assessment. We don't know if it was an attendance issue, if this student had to be reassessed. You know, they just had a bad testing day. So I would definitely pull in, you know, unit assessments, the beacon data, just triangulating the data.
And I think when we look at attendance, we also really need to work to connect with and communicate with the families and, you know, like building that relationship and that trust with families is kind of our first and foremost step. You know, when we have those, we're able to help guide them, you know, and give them some sort of direction. But we have to lead with compassion and understanding and not judgmental.
Yes.
And I think so often, like parents are afraid to come in to the school because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be seen as less than.
Mhm. Well, I think that we're all on the same page, and these observations that we did with these leaders will really help us become great leaders.
I like that we all did different things.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that was good.
Sure.
Well, good job, everyone. That was good.